morning, good afternoon, everyone. I know I'm actually standing between you and a cold beer right now, but we're gonna be a little quick on this process. So when we looked at presenting in front of this forum, we wanted to take a different approach. We wanted to come back and look at how we built programs to support a culmination of IT and OT and bridging the gap between the environments. So we needed to define first, from a biopharmaceutical perspective, medical device perspective, what do we do? And why is it important that our products are up and running all the time, helping sustain lives and help people have a better quality of life? So some of the key areas we look at from a cyber risk perspective are as follows. We look at shutting down of the environment. How do we protect product risk and safety risk for the environment? Then we look at the intellectual property risk, compliance, HIPAA, and other regulatory and FDA bodies as well, and anything that could help us understand what an operational disruption to the environment means to the safety of our product, the safety of our facilities, as well as, I'm gonna throw a term out at you, I'm gonna use a new acronym. It's called OOF. We look at CIA, which is confidential integrity and availability, but I look at OOF, I look at organizational, operational, and financial. Because when we define our impacts, we have to look at all those three elements to help us understand the business, okay? And particularly we look at what happened with COVID and everything else and the quality impact on our environments. But what I want to take away here on this slide is, I'm going to move through the presentation, is that from an OT mindset, we want to make sure that we eliminate this last statement. If it works, don't touch it, and don't interrupt the supply chain. And what I'm saying there is that IT historically has had a negative connotation, negative presence in the OT world. Why? That one event when you patch their server and it brings the environment down and you cannot get it back up within their SLA. Okay, so when we're talking about here, we wanted to bring, again, I'm talking about bringing the conversation up to a higher level, because now we have to engage at the strategic level or the C-suite level. We want to talk about what does it mean to create a program that addresses both IT and OT convergence, as well as help you to secure not only your IT assets, but your OT assets, helping make sure that, again, building safer products, keeping the environment up and running. So you have to look at the culture and the mindset changes. You have to look at change management, not just change management. I'm gonna go back to OOF again. You're looking at change management impacts of operational, organizational, and financial. And then, of course, how do you plan such a big initiative as this? And then the technology, using technology as an enabler and not as a total driver of the entire system. And I'm gonna give you a couple bonus here. We talk about communication and risk management. I have to throw that in there because as I now move a little bit more into the more the strategic role, I have to throw communications and risk management in that process because those are the areas that we forget about a lot. And so I broke this presentation as we talk about culture and mindset. I apologize for a lot of the rich content or more detailed content of these slides, but I want to make sure you got a better understanding as to why we chose to focus on the barriers and also focus on key success factors. The barriers themselves are the traditional, where the leadership and accountability, they pretty much say, I'm going to dedicate a C-suite person, but he may not be that right person. I may give you a director of audit to run an OT project. You need someone who's responsible for the supply chain. That if something happens, I can go to that VP or SVP or whatever level that person is accountable for making sure the success of this program across the board. You also look at, and I'm not going to drain the slide, we're also going to go down to the Big Bang Theory. Most of the times, organizations want to go Big Bang. And as we know, OT assets hang around for 15, 20, 30, maybe more years than that. IT assets, 2 to 5 years, max. Lack of consensus. What are we really trying to do here? Sustainability and scalability. But I really want to talk about the successes here. You need to make sure that the CISO and the CIO are not put in a position where they're trying to fund and manage this engagement. It is a supply chain investment. They can be positioned as advisors and provide operational support. Demonstrate a risk by doing a pilot. I would say the biggest bang for your buck right now is doing a pilot. Taking a small organization, a small site, doing a pilot process to make sure that you're going to be successful, because as you start to expand this out regionally, and I'm going to use a phrase my partner coined, think global, act local. And so as you build, you're going to build your site champions, your change champions early on, because these are the ones you're going to use not only just from managing at the regions, but they're also going to be responsible for education and awareness. They're going to be responsible for making sure that the plant managers are successful and the organization is successful. And then focus on the benefit, not just threat detection. What is the true benefit to the organization? If you look at it, if you use the language that the manufacturing folks understand, they understand sustainability, they understand availability, confidentiality, integrity. That's what they focus on. They focus on uptime. And strategic approach, be purposeful, practical, pragmatic, and professional. Professorial. And so what I'm getting at there is, the organization defines the purpose. You're defining the purpose of this program, the impact of this program, the disruptions you're trying to, and the use cases you're trying to address. You put it in such a way that it's manageable in smaller chunks. It's also practical to implement, but professorial says that now we talked about the change agents or the change ambassadors. I need you guys out there pushing education and awareness on a consistent basis, making sure that the people who need to know. And then, of course, align accountability and a payment plan. The payment plan I use as a payment plan because I know we, traditionally on the IT side, we would go and ask for hundreds of millions of dollars, and at the end of the quarter, we may have only spent 20 million. But for every dollar we ask for, the OT side or the manufacturing side has to account for that somewhere. So I can't buy a product that's going to cost me $50 million and then I'm selling my product for $10, $10 an item. Somewhere, someone has to make up for that. And since right now, with the economic situation, and even before that, I can't squeeze all those operational costs, push it in there and push the product up to a non-profitable perspective. And of course, this is a multi-year journey. So now as we start to bring the IT leadership into this program, we have the barriers as mentioned over here. I really want to focus on the area of it's only shared, limited, or restricted information. Communication. Communicate early, often, and to the levels that the organization can understand and the true impact that it's going to have an organization. You want to build that shared awareness to risk. Everyone is accountable for risk within the organization. Their program is accountable for that, and you have to manage accordingly. Inclusive supply chain and ecosystem. You mentioned earlier in some of the other presentations, the ecosystem is expanding. Your ecosystem now is going to include cloud aware, it's going to include cloud, it's going to include other internal, external vendors, all up and down your supply chain. Make sure you get proper representation in that area. And again, I'll go back and I'm going to stress this throughout the entire presentation. The supply chain leader has to be in that partnership relationship and accountable for working whatever within that organization. Demystify. Local versus, my application is unique. In every plant, in every organization, you're going to hear that I have 100 sites and everyone is unique. But guess what? Manufacturing is manufacturing. They have some nuances. You may either be making a wet product, a dry product, or electronic product. But manufacturing is manufacturing. So let's get that, let's have that conversation, and let's deal with trying to get to an 80-20 rule. We talked about the cost challenges. It's not just a security implementation, it's an operational implementation. You just can't continue to take more money out of the operational side and not see that there's going to be a degradation in either the product safety, or there's going to be your brand is going to start to suffer because people are going to migrate away from your specific environment. Over-communicate throughout the process. Don't force a one-to-one IT and OT convergence. There are different scenarios for IT and there's different scenarios for OT. There's some common scenarios or use cases, but make sure you understand and separate the two. And train resources on unique OT security requirements. That is a must, because everyone is dealing with a talent shortage right now. You have to be able to leverage your existing talent pool. Training is easier to take OT person and give them additional cyber skills than to take an IT person and give them OT skills. I show this slide here as we want to demonstrate, as you're going through your process of identifying your program and assessing it against a standard or multiple standards, you may come up with a hybrid, but at least pick one. Start with this is basically going by NIST. But start with NIST, start to build your other manufacturing hybrids or standards as well. But we wanted to show that as you're going through an exercise of identifying the threats, the vulnerabilities, the operational impact, your response, and the timing, when you're creating that risk profile with the business, you want to go through this exercise so that everyone understands I have to go and define my true risk appetite, my risk profile, understanding what it means to a site. A site's always going to tell you I'm up 24/7, but in all actuality, when you peel back the layers of the onion, you find out they're 5/7. Or they're make the stock versus to make the order. And so you have to factor that into your equations for your risk profile. And you go through this different scenario for different areas you want to talk about. And right now what's really hot out there is ransomware and malware. These items are going to always be out there, especially malware. You're going to always have this in your OT environment because, let's be honest, you're running a system that's been running 20, 30 more years. You can't patch it. You may not be able to put antivirus on there, software on there, and you may not be able to take that system down. So you have to put in place mitigation controls and processes to allow for them during their preventive maintenance windows to do some type of support to keep the environment in sync. Business planning. This is the area where we tend to, I'm going to say we drop the ball a lot from the planning perspective. The C-suite, as well as the IT or corporate side, as we call them, they miss some key elements in helping define that plan. They want quick fix, they want big bang, they want it for the smallest amount of money we can get it, without impacting safety and quality and integrity of the system, which is a little harder to do. So when you're putting together this plan, consciously go through them and help them understand, what does this program really mean? Do we take it in smaller chunks? How do we plan it out? Who do we engage with? And let's agree on some simple milestones. Because at the end of the day, the manufacturing teams, they definitely are focusing on uptime, quality, and customer experience. One of the longest poles in your tent in your testing process is getting through your quality systems and your validation. They will delay you because they have to make sure that the integrity of the product is secured at all times. So, and the regulators will want to make sure that you have an auditable process. So let's keep that in mind. And decreasing downtime, making sure I can get up as much maximum product out of the system as possible. There's an item or bullet point where they say retire legacy assets. This is an area where it's harder to do. It gets complex in the OT world because you have a lot of legacy equipment. They may be systems that are running XP, NT. It's not hard to show that. The problem with that is that because this product is still a viable product, I have to allow those systems to run to continue to meet my safety and regulatory issues, as well as meet my product demand from my customers. They still need that product. I can't just take it down and bring in a new system at one point in time. It costs millions of dollars. It's not cost effective to do. So as much as you can, look for your end-of-life systems, start to patch them. The area that we miss a lot or we don't spend enough attention on is firmware upgrades. And firmware upgrades get tied to upgrades associated with the vendor product. Not picking on Simmons or Rockwell. If you have not kept your contract up to date with Simmons and Rockwell, they're not going to update your systems. They're going to keep you at a minimum release, so you have to work those issues out and say, how do I get, what mitigating controls do I put in place? What compensating controls, if you look at it from a cyber perspective, and how do I make sure that I can restore those environments in case of some type of a problem? And of course, increased organizational awareness. I'm going to keep harping on that because that is one of the biggest problems we see a lot is we're not spending enough time on education and awareness within the fields and within the people who are really relevant or supporting our operational integrity, operation products. Making sure that you've got your program broken down into manageable chunks. Don't bite off, don't do big bang. Big bang is not going to benefit you. So let's make sure you got the ROIs associated with the risk and rewards and the next steps and where you need support from your leadership teams. Let's make sure that we focus on building the foundation first. You're going to hear a lot of folks talking about agile and agility and turn on a dime and time to market. But at the end of the day, if I don't have my foundation built correctly, I can't do agile. And even though I'm in an agile environment and I want to go through digital transformation, I can't do digital transformation if my environments are still at a legacy state where I can't take advantage of the latest and greatest digital transformation technology. And how quickly can I turn to those environments and say, now I need to move quicker on a manufacturing change management process. They can't turn some of those factories around. They can't turn some of those systems around in a day or two. And concentrate your fund on imperatives to success. Making sure that, again, as we talked early on, if you built those, if you know the use cases you're going after, target those. Make sure you can measure them. Make sure you focus your funding on that. It's easier to go back to the C-suite or organization once you've proven the successes that are addressing some of your major flaws or your major bottlenecks and preventing you from moving forward. This is where we think about. This is where we get to think global and act local approach. And as you look at the chain here, you're pretty much looking at making sure, as was mentioned in the previous presentation, collecting of that data centrally, processing and analyzing it, and making sure that as you distribute, as you identify risk across the organization, you can centralize it, report on it, making sure that everyone's on the same page with that. And then regionally, your deployment is going to become a lot easier to do regionally once you've got your proof of concept in place, once you've done your regional assessments and put in place who's going to support this regionally. And this is where, when you work with your partner in an advisory role and as a holistic solution provider, they can help you regionalize and deploy this. Because you're going to be short-staffed, and making sure that you're partnering with a great partner that can actually regionalize this and even send forces out there to help you deploy it. One of the things that was successful for us is that we had a partner that put their process together to help us deploy it regionally where we didn't have to be on site. It just got deployed automatically. Well, as part of a script, it got deployed automatically within the regions. And the regional representation was there to help us do that. And of course, as you look at your organizational impacts and building those resources, then you can spend more time focusing on training the regional and local resources to support your product and support the environment. Technology as enablers. So I talked about this early on. This is a game changer. You have to have a partner. You have to have technology. But don't use technology as the driving force to your manufacturing, OT, and IT environment, because you're going to get burned and you're going to get a lot of negative reactions from your C-suite. Make sure you send your partners and your technology folks through a vetting process, putting them through benchmarking and testing. If a partner will not, or if a partner refuses to go through the RFP process with you, then that means you might want to look at a different partner. Because there's a lot of IT and OT partners out there now, but just make sure they're going to be really partners with you. Look at your assessment, your detailed asset inventory, because that is a key, making sure you got your inventory. Now, we know that this has been a problem for the last at least 10 years, getting a good asset inventory. It is still going to be a problem, because you're always going to have those pockets of information or pockets of assets that are either on the network or off the network or hidden behind firewalls, or R&D may say, I'm going to only turn this on when I need it. So now you start in your discovery process, it starts to break down. So making sure that you can get a good asset inventory in their areas as well. I'm not going to tell you, it is a complex environment. And OT and IT is very complex, but it's doable. So just focus on making sure that the technology requirements include your network as well. A lot of times you're going through a network refresh, you're going through an upgrade, you may start to get in the middle of that process, you may deal with another mergers and acquisitions, so that has to be included in this process as well. And don't remember to go to spans, taps, cabling, et cetera, because some of your environments are older, and as you start to go into the network closet, you can see some crazy things. You can see a lot of old wiring and just stuff that is like you thought you saw it in the history book, and now you know where it actually was deployed. Looking at the central database, making sure you're collecting all this information. Whether you're collecting it in your SIM, whether you're collecting it into a database that you can do some additional aggregation and segregation on, make sure you can do that. But then I'm going to make sure we talk about the OT-sensitive approach. When we talk about the OT-sensitive approach, this is where we kind of break and go back to IT versus OT, but we're still saying that in that approach, there are some items that are specific to OT. They know how to restart those SCADAs. They know which HMIs they need to do. They know the intricate complexities of how that environment works. You have to keep that into your equation when you're creating your playbooks, your runbooks, and factoring in when they have preventive maintenance windows that they can effectively go in and start to apply some of the changes you need them to address. Monitoring and logging is also critical here. There are ways of monitoring OT assets. You have to investigate those and deploy them. Your third-party vendors, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. They have contracts, they have SLAs. Earlier presentation, it was mentioned that you're looking at your SLAs and you find out that you're missing some things, and there was some phone calls that was made that you didn't realize that you thought you had one outage, and it ended up being 12 or 14 outages that year. Those SLAs are important to you as well. And they need to be built into your contracts. They need to make sure you have some penalties for that as well. And I'm going to go back to my partner scenario. Partner with people with deep manufacturing experience. On the IT side, I will be one of the first ones to tell you, I am not going to be intricately involved with every command or every control that's being executed on an HMI SCADA. Not going to do it, can't do it. So you have to get a partner who has what I call OT whisperers. OT whisperers these are the type of people that have been out there in the field. They've actually, they've been ex-plant managers, they've been supervisors, they've been in and walking the plants. They know exactly what's going on in that environment. They walk into your organization when you're presenting to that C-suite and that supply chain person. They know the language and they can talk the language. They gain instant credibility. This is going to help sell your program. It's going to help improve your program. And then don't settle. Don't settle, don't settle, don't settle. You can actually have there's safe ways of doing IT and OT level in the same environment in a reasonable way. Now, this is a bonus slide. We talk about communication and risk management. I have to throw this slide in there because now, as I mentioned, I'm transitioning more to that communication risk management to make sure that the organization understands what it means when we start talking about making changes into IT/OT world. Communicate early and often. Don't feel that you can't communicate. The success of the program is going to be built on or based upon you ensuring that your communications are effective, have the right level of detail, and that action and actionable, which is why I come to the next step of your risk register. If you don't have a risk register, create one. Make sure that it's actionable. Because the C-suite can give you funding. They can also move mountains to make sure that your directions or your directives are met by addressing actionable items in your risk register. Review them as quarterly as most with your C-suite. I'm going to jump down to the last note under here. We're talking about don't focus on good metrics. Good metrics are great. Everyone wants to pat themselves on the back. Hey, great, I got my bonus. Woohoo! But guess what? You need to focus on those metrics that are going to show some negative connotations to your program. And these metrics, these are the ones, as we talk about communicating early and often, these are the ones that go on the risk register. These are also the ones that need to be in play for decisions at the C-suite level. I'm going to jump over to the risk management side. I talked earlier about this, the supply chain risk profiles. It is imperative that you have these profiles defined by the business and also by the supply chain. You need to have clearly defined risk appetites and tolerances. We talked about a plant being down for 2 days may not be as impactful to a plant being down 10 days if that one plant that was down 2 days has a risk appetite that I'm gonna make the stock and I make enough inventory to suffice or meet my demand for at least a week. So make sure that's clearly defined and in the OT and the IT world, because those sites, when they look at their preventive maintenance windows, they can factor that into the equation. Your governance boards, we talked about, that was mentioned on the earlier case one. Those governance boards are at various levels and they meet at various times. They're talking about what's going on my manufacturing side, what's going on my, at the corporate level, and what's going on in the overall program. Legal and privacy need to become a permanent seat at the table in these discussions, as well as crisis management, security operations, and that representation as well. Okay. So I'm going to bring this all together because I know I've been talking for a while here, but I want to make sure I gave you a slide to take away that says, how do we bring this all together and how do we make your program successful going forward? Create the business case first, not dashboards or metrics. Dashboards and metrics are only going to show how you're doing, how you're progressing. But the leadership team want to see that early on even though there hasn't been any work done. Gain the manufacturing trust. And I'm going to come back and say manufacturing trust means at the beginning is zero trust. So you have to gain their trust in supporting this environment and supporting this initiative. Your culture is because of these programs, is very disruptive. So your culture has to be allowed to understand that it's okay that we're disrupting the environment because we're going to put in place mitigation, we're going to put together controls, and we're going to put together a formal process to make sure we continue successfully on with this engagement. So take your blueprint away that says, lay out the business plan, milestones and metrics, make sure your C-suite is engaged, think global, act locally. Use technology as an enabler, not as a total driver. And don't settle for just network analysis, because most of the times we look at the network and say we can put in microsegmentation, we can put in a firewall, but design your network in the proper alignment with the site. Don't give them a networking solution for a site that's 24/7 when a site is only available 5/7. It has to be scalable, it has to meet the demand of the organization, and it has to meet their risk appetite. And of course, my words of wisdom or takeaway is get a great PM and get a great partner. Make sure you're going to do what you said you're going to do when you're going to do it, because everyone's looking at you to make sure this program is successful. Disruption to the supply chain is everyone's problem. And of course, we go to final saying that it takes a village. It really does. In order to be successful, it's going to take a village of people to get this project done. I thank you for your time, and I hope I've given you some words that can help.